Chair of the Creative Writing Department here at ASFA. Welcome to the third annual Creative Writing Showcase. We're so excited to share what we've got for you. I have a couple of words of thanks, and then I want to give you a little bit of prep for what you're about to experience. To do that, let me give you 3 quotes, okay? All by famous and excellent writers. So the first one is by a poet named Ezra Pound, whose philosophy of creativity was summed up in 3 words, and those words are make it new. Make it new. So keep that in your head. Another quote that I think is pertinent is by the extraordinary fiction writer Toni Morrison, who once said, "I only have 26 letters of the alphabet. I don't have color or music." And then the final quote I want to point out is by the current Poet Laureate of the United States, Ada Limon, who is the first female Latinx Poet Laureate of the United States. And she wrote, "When I found poetry, everything seemed to make sense. It makes room for mystery, for breath, for silence, and strangeness." So keep all those in mind. I'll reference them. First, when it comes to making it new, this is, I've learned now after 3 years that this is about making it new. Every time we do this, it's new. And there are a lot of really cool new components to this event. First and foremost, it's really, really exciting that our tech crew today is our 9th grade creative writing class, which is very exciting. Jumped in, and as far as I know, none of them have tech theater experience, and they have bravely jumped in and have been doing a great job. And that is because I want to thank Adam Sturmer, the DJD technical director, who has been an extraordinary support to us in terms of producing this, giving us great creative ideas. He's also been a great teacher to that group. I've been really impressed with the way he has engaged them as equals, and they've learned a lot throughout this process. So thank you, Adam. You've done awesome. The music department's Amber Rocker is helping us make it new this year. Amber will be accompanying. Amber is going to be accompanying Kevin Cristino later on in the show, so we are super excited about that. And Adam and Amber have helped inject a little color and music. So we are lucky to have a little color and music in addition to those 26 letters of the alphabet today. So we're excited about that. I also have to thank the director of this program, Ashley Jones, who has been awesome as always, and we're really happy for her involvement. All of you guys out there, because not only are you here to celebrate this moment with us, but you've all made sacrifices for this to happen in lots of ways, not least in terms of your time. So we are so happy to share this work with you and thankful that you're here. I say it's new, but in a way, one of the new things that's really exciting to me is that what you're going to experience today is a lot more in line with a traditional creative writing reading. And some of you may have been to creative writing readings here on campus or elsewhere, but a lot of you probably haven't. And we're excited to give you a glimpse at what we do and to focus on the 26 words with a little bit of color and music involved as well. And I think that suits particularly this group of 4 writers. They are extraordinarily deep thinkers, these 4, as I hope you all probably know to some extent. And it's not too much of a stretch to say they're brilliant people. And their work expresses that. And so we're going to be featuring their words. And I'm so excited that we are going to be making room for their mystery, breath, silence, and strangeness, because it's pretty profound, and we're really excited about the opportunity to share that with you. So one last thing I want to say is that you guys can help us make room for mystery, breath, silence, and strangeness by doing a couple things as they relate to reading etiquette. First of all, if you would please silence and really even turn off your cell phones so that they don't not only distract the folks up here, but the folks around you. Because one of the things that an audience has to do at any performance, but in particular at a reading, is listen very intently. And it's important that we all make space for everybody to do that. So please do that for me. One thing I'll also say, it's okay to let your mind wander at a reading. That's okay. A reading isn't the same thing as reading the words on the page. And it's okay to engage the musicality of the language, the sound. It's okay to engage the images that you'll see on the screen and make meaning of your own out of that experience, okay? Trust that you'll always just come back and get into the moment with the reader. It's also okay to show your appreciation at the end of a given piece. The way we typically do it in the creative writing world these days is we snap. But if you want to clap, that's fine too. But just wait until the end of each individual piece to do that if you want to. And I just want to throw out a little bit about the structure. Last thing, we will have an intermission at the middle of the program. So Will Bittner, our first reader, will read. Izzy Cox will then read. We'll have an intermission. After that, Kevin Cristino will come out, followed by Atticus Hill. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you again so much for joining us, and enjoy.
Nothing's ever promised. So I might as well burn today, set fire to doubt, spit shrieks from a flaming mouth to masses moving scary, tiptoeing around the cracks in the glass while I glide inches above heads, stuffed with tomorrow's nothings and next week's zeros and nothing of today. But I may as well, because that's all I got. Might as well let this snot drip and flow from my pen and let this wind blow my mind wide open.
Skeletal. I am the words. I am the pen that wastes its ink but portrays its heart. I'm thought to be the darkness in certain places, the things in plain, everyday conversations. When you hear laughter or crying, it's the sounds that you don't hear, and I walk just following behind. I am the moments that you least expect to see me. I have jumped across cliffs and edges to get across lands, the marks that have made the journey.
Inosculation. If I could figure out how to write a love poem, this would be first on the list of things to write about. Like when the mask became part of the face, cleaved together, growing and twisting, and each individual jawbone disappeared. The surgery blue becoming the same as skin, and every accidental, unsterilized brush of hands turned into fear, and skin rough as tree bark. Count each day at home like rings in the wood. Run a finger over the ridges and feel the stagnation. Press us between each other until immunity.
Elegy for Big John, for a $7 million Triceratops skeleton. Poor Big John, frills oozing in the dirt, and no penicillin for 66 million years. It happens to the best of us, that tale as old as time. Pretty girl, nice horns, big beak, caught your leaf-filled eyes, but you weren't the only one who saw her. Love doesn't take half measures, and now you're slightly less complete. The bastard punched right through, horns on armor, because you were just too big, just too blessed to have everything. In your last moments, infection in command, did you regret it? Surely a lot of love could fit in that 5-foot head, enough to launch your lovely lady off a seesaw so she can take you in all at once, eyes to Thagomizer. I bet the love stayed in when the alpha broke skin. Stuff like that heals. Except it didn't. Candy hearts pooled in that 5-foot petri dish. Something old and odious got in, got fat. In your last moments, is it any comfort that you're worth more in death than you were in life? You got a price tag. They paid for you what we paid for Alaska. But that might not mean much, you scaly South Dakotan. I think you're alone. We never found the Triceratops that got away. Doors. After 5 minutes of waiting, I was sure he wasn't coming. I had knocked 3 times already. Each time he called out, "Hold on a minute." But it had been a while since I'd last heard his shuffling behind the door. At first, it sounded like any old person getting out of bed, the thump and the panting and grunting of someone who hated rude awakenings. In my arms was a brown paper bag holding 3 squash, 6 okra, and a smattering of tomatoes. The kid next to me was younger than me, but his heart wasn't beating as fast. We were there to pass it forward, to feed the poor and learn about altruism. And here I was, afraid I'd have to leave, and a minute later, the man behind the door would open it, and all that's there to greet him would be the door across the hall. Then, a sound. It was halfway between dragging and thumping, and it continued on longer than it should have. At first, it sounded like a walker, but as the minutes passed, it became a suitcase filled with concrete. Confusion mixed with hints of nervousness, but for him or myself, I wasn't quite sure. When the door handle at last clicked, I let out a breath, hiding behind my teeth. And as the door swung open, I began my introduction, honed to a fine point by 20 doors before this, only to realize I was talking to the air. It took me a moment to look down instead of up and see a man, just like all the others in all these apartments, but with a bit less of himself below the hips. Desert Drifter. Some people really couldn't care less about who you are, man or woman, young or old, black or white. These are the people that keep the world from spinning off its axis. And these are the people, or perhaps person, that slide out of the bathtub faucet and make themselves at home. In Melinda Alvarez's case, it really did slide out of the faucet. There she was, in her windowless bathroom, the door locked and the AC clogged with dust bunnies that could keep a space station pressurized. And what did she turn around and see in the bathtub? A pile of neon jackets in a head-splitting array of colors, a beard like a barbed wire fence spilled over them from beneath a tilted hat. They got into a little contest, her screaming, it drowning her out with a bout of snoring. By the time the neighbors came to investigate, the creature had quit the apartment. All that remained was Melinda, faint on the floor. Sweat puddled around her. She told paramedics there had been a man in her bathtub. But when the police showed up before any evidence did, she decided she didn't believe her story either. But a few days later, the mayor of their little town, Richard Alvarez, no relation to Ms. Melinda Alvarez, took to Twitter to address the residents of Placeholder, Arizona. In a brave, vivid message, he recalled the visitor's intrusion into his home as well. Upon hearing a strange noise from downstairs, the mayor kissed his sleeping wife, grabbed his 1994 Division II championship bat, and snaked through the house with the precision of a Navy SEAL. A flipped light switch revealed a wild vagabond rummaging through the fridge. But fortunately for the city's brave mayor, the figure fled. Within a week, 24 more reports had come in. The intruder intruded everywhere he could. Home, business, brain. He had no prejudice about where he struck next. Liche Alvarez, again no relation, was walking home when a swanky car pulled up beside her. The driver leaned out the window and whistled. But she stared at a shape on his back seat, dimly lit by the touchscreen radio. Whatever it was either monstrously fat or monstrously layered with jackets. Monstrously hairy even in the darkness, and monstrously disheveled for such plush leather seats. Liche thought it was a body, but the driver didn't notice it. Liche was suddenly hit by a wave of barnyard odor which drove her to her knees. The driver caught it at the same time, sniffed with wide eyes, until a roaring snore emanated from the back seat and drove him tumbling onto the pavement. He ran off screaming into the sweltering night, but his passenger disappeared before the police could arrive, leaving behind only the faint scent of wet dog. Marcus Sweaty, an HVAC artisan on his way to the big city, had his own close encounter. It was morning rush hour, and as Marcus chased the bumper of the '05 Nissan Xterra in front of him, he felt his car shudder. Then came a steady sound like an iceberg groaning and cracking from beneath the hood. He turned on his flashers and made for the emergency lane. The hood bowed and flexed. Something important popped. Then the hood flew open, blinding Marcus. He swerved to the right and flew off the road, sending a heavy object flying and screaming from the engine block and into the air. Marcus plowed into a nearby tree, triggering a cascade of yellow leaves and, it appeared, brightly colored jackets. Nothing more was found. Folks started calling the creature the Desert Drifter. It never did anything to justify a more intimidating name. An investigative team from Phoenix concluded that it was a living ghost. And a team put together by the local ranchers at Sammy's bar to the tune of stale ale and jukebox rocking agreed. Windows stayed shut, doors stayed locked, eyes stayed open, and guns stayed loaded. But the creature appeared all the same. It was the first real lead, the snare that almost snagged the rabbit by the foot, and came from Miss Karen Alvarez. Miss Karen Alvarez, no relation to the other Alvarezes, was known in town as that crazy old bat. When a baseball flew over Miss Karen Alvarez's fence, as far as the kids were concerned, it ceased to exist. It was in the house, behind that fence, that the drifter next appeared. A burning stench ambushed Miss Karen Alvarez as she finished up in the garden and pulled off her rubber boots. A look through the faded screen door revealed the drifter lounging in her sink, reading a flyer from the fridge as his hat sizzled on the stovetop. For the first time in local memory, Karen fled her fortress, screaming as she ran with one boot all the way to the police station. And by then, the chief was ready to retire early and leave the drifter to the sucker who succeeded him. But Miss Alvarez, after spending a few minutes heaving into a trash can, marched to his desk and cracked the case wide open. She remembered the logo on the flyer the drifter was holding. She knew where he would appear next. The placeholder Catholic high school gym was the site of an all-out war. Daniel Alvarez and Luna Alvarez, their same last name, again, fortunately, a coincidence, were intrepid vanguards, forging ahead into the trench-crossed Ardennes of their sexuality as their tongues crashed in great airbursts. This was the awkward scene the drifter stumbled onto. Rather, slid onto, as it unscrewed the air conditioning grate with its fingernails and slunk down the wall, cushioned by rising sound waves as the gate crashed and quivered on the floor. The lovebirds turned, and the drifter let himself break in two and be absorbed by their disbelieving eyes. He silently strolled to their brainstems and slid down them like fire poles before reaching the thinnest skin where bony, youthful backs were accentuated by vertebra. He had an invisible string between Luna and Daniel, which he sucked on like a scuba mask, letting him survive in both their bodies at once. This was the most difficult part. The teens needed to breathe. The drifter snatched the impulse moving up their spines and held on tight. It carried him to their lungs, up through their throats, and to their mouths where, at the last possible moment, he bit the string with his teeth and severed the connection. He rode Luna's breath out to the gym floor, regaining his size. Daniel breathed out a brand new drifter. Before the confused Alvarezes could scream, the doors burst open and officers bounded in. They surrounded the drifter and its clone, but the pair were tranquil statues. A lieutenant wanted their layers off to sniff out weapons. The officers' arms, unbuttoned, unzipped, grabbed and pulled at linen and hats and scarves until their muscles burned and the pile of pulled-off clothes was taller than the drifter's. At last, a pair of gray sweatshirts were removed, and the drifters disappeared, their clothing falling limply as stale air slid out from where their bodies should have been. Up above, sharing drinks with its newborn brother, the old drifter made a toast. The pair looked down through heaven and chuckled, not maliciously, but contentedly, happy with the knowledge that everything made a little less sense than before. Bite. Your blood beat. With each pulse of warmth, I remembered my beginning, when I left the waterlogged tire of my birth and buzzed into the sunlight. You should have been flattered that you were such a fount of fertility, but I knew you wouldn't be. Thanks to your soft, exposed skin, my bloodline would not end with me. I landed on your bare forearm, unsheathing my mouth and dribbling numbness in ecstatic anticipation. The surface tension of your skin broke and our exchange began. Blood struck my nerves and the world exploded into a prism of existence. At that moment, all the world unfolded as I drank deeply from your vein. My mouth had disappeared into the puncture. Unfocusing my many eyes, I saw your skin, your uncaring face turned away, the sunlight halo around your head, the air molecules upon which it reflected, and further, the space blanket atmosphere, the vacuum, the planets, moons, stars, galaxies, and the edge of the universe as it ran in all directions. Suddenly, I was buffeted with air. I refocused, pushing through the fog of joy, and locked eyes with you. Fat with blood, angry blood. Your anger crashed down on me with a thunderclap. Our bond ended, and my life was snuffed out. Nothing was left except an imprint on the time stream and a splotch of your beautiful, life-bringing, life-ending blood smeared across your palm. Dead on arrival for Gabby Petito. Look,
Look!
Look,
Look!
look.
Look!
look, look. Big rocks, trees, green, sky, an average blue. Her eyes have been glued on the sky for a few hours now. A pine needle swan dives onto the tip of her nose. God, she wishes she could scratch it. Needles don't fall in winter, but it must be winter. Her hands are frozen solid. She can't lift them. The cold must have numbed them. Funny, she doesn't feel snowfall. The first specks are what she should feel. Scattered flakes have texture on her skin. The blizzard doesn't. She must be in a blizzard. That's why the sun is so bright. It's reflecting off the ice crystals. The sun looks like a candle in a dark place, eye-searing brightness. The floaters in her eyes are like boats. They fjord unconsciousness, bobbing, carried in hands, a dancing ember in each. It smells like salt water wherever it is. There are no big rocks there. Trees, though. No blue in the sky. It's ink. The moon is pallid. How sad it is alone. She is alone. But she wasn't alone yesterday. A lover was here. When they met, they melded. A Ross painting. That was their love. It wasn't love between them, it was love of the earth they tread. They both loved it. That was their connection, and she still loves it, although it is hugging her a little too tightly now. She doesn't know where he is. He left while she slept in this pine and ice bed. If she stays here, he's bound to come back. She doesn't know how to feel. He was a poor mimic of the love the earth gives her now. He was a fox, jumping into holes at the crack of thunder. He was a crack of thunder himself, window rattling, a rattlesnake. She feels a rattlesnake slither out of her chest. How beautiful, returning to the earth. She would very much like to follow him. Alas, she is frozen solid. The mountains are very pretty. The trees, the sky. Maybe she will stay. Sit a while. Watch a while. Look a while. Look, 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 look.
Love poem. I wanted to tell about the bodies, the damp earth lung scent, the layered echoes of the woods, the leaf as it drifts, the branches far above, rippling with the wind, domino and static at once. I wanted to tell about the teeth, as they silent the thrum of a quick carotid, the way they shine like stars in the sky, stained dark as night falls and moon rise, the puncturing clasp with a kudzu vine on a tree trunk, the way they plunge like a drop of rainwater thrown from a waterfall. I wanted to tell about the silence between each heartbeat, the pound of paw pads on forest floor, the terrified ring in your ears when the birds fall silent and the predator moves and your own being blinds you. The invasion of the parasite after first contact, the roots as they dig and dig in the deep, dark dirt. I wanted to tell about the ache of a snapped limb, the sting of nettle and thorns, and ways to protect one's own, flash and sharp, the crash of waves and rocks and water and wind and bodies, the collision and chiseling of a chasm as it slits the planet's crust. Cobalt alpenglow mirrored in a glacial tarn as the mountain crest climbs beyond cloud cover haze. Afrocotropism. In the church pews, the mothers cry as another baby is taken much too early, dipped underwater and buried. Cemetery grass glows fluorescent around each tombstone, flattened so the blades of a lawnmower can glide over top. My grandfather was bitten by a water moccasin, swimming in Lake Gunnersville, fishing for catfish and brim, veins dark with poison. I was washed in the muddy river, white dress with stripped amaryllis petals, and the preacher wore thick rubber waders. My grandmother gets down on her knees every decoration day to put the baby blue flowers in place and clear the weeds. And when God ripped his people out of the ground, what do you suppose sprung up to grow in their place? The fox gave birth in the church basement and built a nest the winter after the baby went into the ground. He lived, I suppose, although to overhear him talking to his wife, he'd have rather died than lost the leg. This will serve for every wasp and carpenter bee that lived in the porch before it rotted and gave way. This barren land used to grow fertile, marshy with rice fields and wild flowers. All this is to say that there were no roots. The Bible tells us that children belong in the kingdom of heaven, but does it still apply if he was never alive to have a soul? Alpenglow. My father is drawing a clock as the sun rises, blood clot orange, juice dripping from clouds, acidic rain like pipelines and millions of jobs and $5 a gallon like teeth, staining the sky, yellowing, as my father rises, bruised blue before dawn, in the bed he shares with my mother, a dark vacant house at his side. She was youngest of 6, left to empty rooms and empty boxes, broke open and out crawled the plague, cloaked in human flesh to hide inhuman skeleton. DNA structure mutated until we are all unrecognizable from ourselves an hour ago, 2 seconds ago, to blood of our blood, my grandfather with the blue eyes turned cataracts, his own melting clock, graphite-dusted fingers, our hands pressed together, palm to palm in prayer, his nails cracking one by one against the dirt of my land, planting seeds, struck cold in the ground. And making less and less, cutting paychecks like everything equals everything eventually. Words like our insurance no longer pays for my father's pain medication, or my mother's blood thinner that keeps another stroke from happening, or my grandfather's Alzheimer's treatment. Like the sun rising into the dawn, melting the frost. Like my father's own clock, melting to the right corner of the page, rising like my father too early in the morning because the pain is so hot, it has melted the sleep right off. And it's to a dark, vacant house because he doesn't recognize his wife's face, or the feel of his dog's fur against his hand, the sickness spreading over his eyes, and by the time he does, the sun has risen, blood clot orange, and my mother is stirring, blood thinned and bled out, and the dog is awake and hungry, and the clock is melted right off the page. I'd like to tell you that we can still come back from this. We take the cover off the pool, and you think about how this time last year, you didn't even have a pool. And then you think about the old house, the postage stamp-sized acre it sat on the swing set in the back, rusting, on how the people who live there now have just ripped it out and left the holes. You think about digging a hole and getting a dogwood to grow. You think about the one from the old house, struck down by lightning, twisted from wind, snapped. Think about how you've never kept a plant alive, and then you start thinking about other things you've never done. You think about what you want, try to picture it, hold on to it, like how your grandmother still calls your father twice a week, how she told you she was bored home alone during quarantine when you knew she hadn't left her house for 3 months before this virus even existed. Think about the last time you saw her and realize you don't remember. She was in the hospital for Thanksgiving, and you couldn't go see her when she got out. You think about her house on the hill, on the property she shares with your grandfather, how her house, when you walk through it, it shakes like it'd like to fly apart, like an earthquake, and the house is on sand. You think about your grandmother sinking below in her shaky house, on her shaky legs, how if it happened tomorrow, you wouldn't be able to remember what your last words were to each other, or when you last texted her first. Maybe never. And then you're back to the pool, a winter's worth of bugs and grass that made it through the cover, swallowed by water and entombed until spring, falling out. You wonder if any of them could have survived. You wonder if your grandmother would surface the next year, dripping melted snow, unfurling her leaves towards the sun. My father shoots a red-tailed hawk. And if grief was the cane we used to climb the mountain, then what was to explain that final flight? The lift and draft and cloudless blue of that day, the thundering of a heartbeat like a river as it tumbles over a waterfall, that final dive and screech of wind, and talons aimed for the eyes. Who was to know? And if grief was that tawny, speckled egg, sun-warmed but body cold, as it tumbles miles from the nest to be cradled by the loam and dead things, memory to memory, an indent will be all that is left behind when the predators come and snap it up from the forest floor. It cracks and leaks and bleeds, yolk blending into white shell, outliving what was created inside, and it is kinder still than what awaits the 3 eggs still in the nest, long abandoned by the wild and nurtured only by a blood-stained beak. And if grief was an empty belly, an empty, echoing gun, a chicken separated from the pack and left out in the open, out from under the bushes, an easy target for a starving predator in the skies, a quick slice, through the neck with a too long talon. The body is too heavy to fly away with, so it will be eaten there, torn into and twitching and defeathered, strewn across the yard. And if grief was experienced, as every fallen, rotted fruit, every too early pecan with its green shell, every stripped bone and baby left behind for minutes or hours or days, an easy target left in the cave and nest and cradle and bed, then grief was always foreseen, always coming and never leaving, and every fall from the tree and every flight was always the last. The unexplored 95%. In the Spokal history, an unnamed sailor is manning the crow's nest late one afternoon, just as the sun slips under the ledge of the horizon, and the light off the water gets concave and strange and throws shadows and shapes where there shouldn't be any. When he sees something, in the middle of trying to explain whatever it is to the closest crewmate, with big eyes and pale skin and big gestures, yelling against the breeze, the sailor falls from his perch. Everyone on deck remembered the snap of wind through his loose shirt as he went, but he never hit the water. There was no splash, no scream, no body. He was falling, and then he was gone, mid-air. It was like everyone on board had blinked together at just the right moment. And when they sent the next deckhand up to get a better vantage point to find the body, whatever he sees up there, he can't ever talk about again. The image steals the words from his tongue. This is what Cohen thinks about as he plunges from the crow's nest of the silver serpent to likely death in the frothing waves below. Cohen had seen it, the huge shadow in the shape of a hand clawed around the Barents Sea, the shadow monster, the Shigadir. Cohen rotates enough on his back to see the sky as he falls, weightless. The sky is an angry, brooding bruise, bad weather for sailing, as any sailor would tell you. But above the horizon and clouds, the new moon hanging like an empty space between stars, something is changing. The dark spot, with its cratered surface of tunnels and caves and mountains and wheat tan color, is moving, seeming to pulse in the air. There's suddenly a great vacuum of wind, as if sucked from a void, and the last thing Cohen sees before he is flipped sideways in the air from the force is the dark spot, limned in light. Cohen sees the object coming from the sky at an unbelievable rate as he slips past the rail, sees the ship tilt just that last degree against a wave, irretrievable. The men on deck bracing, fates gambled away the second they stepped off the wharf and aboard. The toes of Cohen's left foot have just breached the icy surface as a large pair of tweezers snatch him from midair. He skyrockets up out of the surf. The tweezers reach out to lift the mask back straight before it touches the waterline with the flat of one metal clamp. The ends, still around Cohen's waist, dip into the water to compensate, dunking his head under. He comes up sputtering and soaking wet, the clamps too tight to draw in air anyway. The strands of his beard freeze instantly, water droplets perfectly round, like strands of pearls against his mouth. The ship stabilized, the tweezers pull Cohen out of the water, dropping him too many feet above the deck. He hits with a muted cracking noise on his side and shoulder, and suddenly it's even harder to breathe. Definitely a rib or two. He's still flat on the deck, crew running around him in panic, while the tweezers pull to the west at a startling rate. Cohen glances up just in time to see the giant hand attached to the sky tweezers as they pull out of the hole left behind by the dark spot. The dark spot. It's gone. Now in its place, a giant eye, blue and bloodshot. Everything else about the giant is obscured, as if through a thick lens, but still visible in the sky. a silhouette that's always been there, shadowy and large, hunched over the ocean, blocking out the light. As soon as they'd set sail from the frozen harbor of Vardo, it had been there, stretching out from the horizon, moving eerily like a human form. Even the eye, human, from the pupil size and shape to the white sclera showing around the iris. If Cohen has ever believed in anything, it is that this creature must be the Shigadir cradling the world. The ocean starts to shake. Not the ship on the waves or even an underwater earthquake, although massive walls of water are stirred up. No, the whole ocean sloshes to the left and then back, the whole world tilting on its axis. There are screams on deck, and more than one man leaning over the railing, sick from the change in equilibrium. But it keeps going, like the world is rolling over itself, around and around and around, like suddenly the rotation of the earth can be felt, and it is a terrifyingly fast, dizzying thing. There's nowhere stationary, nowhere still. Cohen is pressed with force against the deck, what is left of his ribs groaning against the G-forces. He couldn't get up if he tried. And then suddenly, the spinning stops, and all that is left is the terrifying feeling of free drop, the swoop in the stomach, and instead of being pressed down, Cohen is now scrambling for something to grab onto to even stay on the ship. Many men are floating in the air, a few feet above the deck, the ocean rising to meet the sky in embrace. They fall for a horrifically long time. Next, the impact. The world cracks open with a shattering noise, like broken glass, like a broken egg into millions of fine pieces. There is no fixing this. The ocean empties out like someone has removed the drain to a bath, like someone has removed the cork of a bottle of wine or a bottle with a ship inside. The ship cracks in two against the ocean floor. But as Cohen sits up to observe the wreckage of the world, he doesn't see what he expects. The ocean floor looks like white carpet, soft and sewn together with cream-colored stitches. The sky has become an eggshell, popcorned with texture and encased with a crown molding, and the horizon has become a light gray, spreading up in a wall. And sitting next to the remains of the world is the Shigadir, the giant in the form of a little girl, thousands of times larger than Cohen is. She's sobbing, her cries booming in the still air, with bloody fingers and knees from kneeling in the glass of the shattered bottle. Despite her size, she can't be very old, limbs still carrying themselves with baby fat and incoordination. No one comes to check on her, and her cries eventually taper off, even if the blood doesn't, glass bleeding out and staining the carpeted ground. She reaches for the ship, hull split down the middle, mast cracked in half, men scattered about, some still moving, groaning, or crying out in fear, some long gone, struck by the same glass that had kept their world intact. Cohen is still flat on his back, a broken rib surely having punctured a lung or some other vital organ sometime in the spinning and smashing, because there is blood welling up from his throat and pooling in his mouth. When the Shigadir's hand closes around him, gripped much too tight, shattering whatever is left undisturbed in his chest. Cohen is suddenly flying out of the wreckage of the world, the ruin in his chest splitting itself open with each rattling breath, lifted to a great red-rimmed ocean blue eye. The Shigadir is even more terrifying up close, freezing Cohen's body unnaturally stiff in fear. Or maybe that's not quite it. The giant starts to shake Cohen around. His body only seems to grow stiffer until his limbs have stopped flopping, stopped moving at all. There is a terrifying weight on his chest, but it no longer hurts. Everything has gone numb. Not even the squeezing clawed hand around his middle is hurting. The blood has stopped, overflowing his lungs, and his breathing is not rattling. It's then that Cohen realizes he has stopped breathing altogether. He doesn't even need to. The girl shakes him again, and he recognizes the way she's moving him. It's as if he were a toy, a doll for her to play with. The last thing Cohen has enough control over his mind and body to see is a bloodshot eye, blue as the ocean Cohen grew up on. His body is born on a wave to sink below, to house fish and coral in his broken, plastic ribs. Everything else is lost.
For country and eagle. Whether the eagle makes himself out to be the center of the flag, or be it that station is borne by his brother, he would nonetheless have to fight him to the death in order to defend that glory. They both have flown like knights in the sky, like ghosts in the desert. Their reign over these lands has brought them a country to which he has always belonged, that he will be stitched upon his flag as an emblem of hope and freedom. Serpents of the formidable audience, dying upon the thorns of his talons and being crucified on the cactuses, a symbol of fearlessness and sacrifice. Or that the fabrics of their nation are worn over their bodies and flags behind them, because in the silence they will have forgotten that they were brothers from the beginning. The battle of their brotherhood is spoken in two languages, though the suffering is the same. They have never learned to love each other in their youth, not even when they were trusted by God that he had set them out to be peacekeepers and guardians of the world as one. In this design, they did not learn to speak more of themselves, to feed the other when he is hungry. Blood, whether it is spilt on the desert rock or if it drains to the ocean, is the chain link between the familial line that is hidden underneath their eyes in the pursuit of betrayal. Like all eagles, they were born with their talons, the harmony they were supposed to inherit, the simple fact that they are kin, yet they were born to hunt and prey. Circling the skies reminds them of what they think they deserve. The reason why they hunt, after all, is because praying does not give them enough power. It makes them feel weak, vulnerable, rooted. So they expect to receive more than what God could provide, so that they could ignore his voice in their heads, replacing their minds with the catharsis of viewing each other as the enemy. Through an echo, they witness his hands in the wrong places, skulls in the broken places of their fate. They both seek to build their own kingdom, but neither of them could have ever thought to build a country together. So the brothers intend to reign over what they possessed in exchange for conquering what they desired, imperializing everything they see for name and greed, fortifying their hearts with a single law that says one of them is more superior than the other. To be king is to be crowned, while killing your own brother is to usurp the throne. For fear of the world which crumbles into one single sky, the two brothers attempt to usurp each other over and over and over again, clawing at each other because they did not have anything to hold on to, nor the compassion that was erased from their line of history. How could they have felt for the things they never inherited? Was it wrong to be an eagle? Had this really all begun since the day they first sprouted their wings, looked up to the sky, and discovered what heaven was like? The battling tells its own story of what the outcomes can be. If one of them dies, he will have achieved paradise, while the other will have achieved nothing more than another body to bury. No trumpets are played in the wind. No soldiers walk across that battlefield and become part of the thousands of roses that grow there. No lines are drawn on any map. Although there is a title of victory that is declared under one flag, it takes its name after the killing that has ripped God into pieces, romping the earth into two. Two losses walked the earth that day, for it is the death of the whole rather than the half. When God sighs, the eagle looks at his fallen brother and recognizes that, yes, this is what he had fought for. The judgment falls onto the victor of the battle, yet he has not felt the beginning of this new era. He doesn't feel the world turning its back on him, becoming forced to search for something new. He doesn't realize that he now has to fly past the old of the earth, the carnage, the literature of his wings, still written in treason. Opportunities become ghosts that walk in the aisles of cactuses. The great pillars that once held everything together now torment the world once more. Without these things, he doesn't even know that he has become lost. Frozen within the lines between nation and country, desperate to rebuild a kingdom that wasn't even there. Fortitude and conquerors. For the Rhineland bastards and the Senegalese tirailleurs who fought during World War I and World War II. 1. Bastards of the Rhineland. The black babies touch their eyes and hope to see their mothers of light and fathers of dark in the dawn of the world where day and night don't exist yet. And pray to God those children will get to breathe again, if it isn't the last of their days. 2. Euthanasia. Blood on the father's hand. He had just killed his son, who barely knew what his murderous father even looked like. And now he will look God in the eye and say, "Yes, I've done it," and your angels will guide it down with fire. 3. World, how generations work. We lived in it. We have lived in it. We live in it. We will have lived in it. We will live in it. We live in it. 4. Year of the devil. The man from Senegal and the woman from Paris made love in the City of Lights in all of Europe. They sang songs in the chateaus, drank wine in Notre Dame, and told each other stories of the war in the Champs. The eyes behind the bushes, watching them as they touch each other's bodies inside a lamp tent, their shadows making love on the fabric, promising them matrimony for tomorrow, belongs to a posterity that will kill their children. The sky glows red, and a star dies somewhere up there. 5. Le jour de gloire est arrivé. Allons enfants de la patrie, aux armes citoyens. Entendez-vous dans les campagnes mugir ces féroces soldats? Ils ne passeront pas. 6. Black ghosts. An African child was to die in the battle for God. Nous sommes Français. Nous sommes Français, he kept saying to himself. But when he survived his first battle, he got to see how French he really was. The colonels took pictures of the Victorians, but he was in none of them. The black bodies on the dirt, blood spilling and mixing with that of their enemies. And on top of the pool, he saw the ghosts of his brethren. No photograph could have caught them standing there. But at the same time, the world, if it had been there, would have been able to hear them praying. Number 7, treason. If the boy from Dakar was to respect his own flag instead of the blue, white, and red, he was condemned to die by that very flag. 8. Aurora Borealis. Yes, it was true. He knew it existed, but he had never seen it before. He supposed he could view dying on the battlefield the same way, fighting for a land that has influenced everything in his life without having to see how beautiful it was in the first place. 9. Tirailleur. Fatality when truth hits the mind. The fire will continue to blaze outside our windows. Kings will overthrow other kings. The kingdom is done. Right when we think we hear the voices of the dead, we don't. Deceived by the fathers who have become before us, dying to protect the little brothers who aim their guns at the spirits of their dead mothers. War still means war. We will have aged by the time it ends, thinking different things in order to continue to be confused, because it is better to live alone than with the things you will have to lose. Cicatrices, scars. He was in his youngest year, but not a stranger to his ancestral knives, which cut him as many times as there were years to his solitude. The blood on the quilts and rugs designed by his Navajo bears, the river hunters, the roamers within his dreamscapes, the eagle and snake on his flag, the guerreros who battled on the same deserts through which he now walked empty and deceived. The many times it didn't hurt, because through violence his life had already risked his innocence, safety, his outlook on simplicity, for which he strove so hard to master complexity. Hung on a wall in the form of black and white photographs detailing stolen desert and river, the chapters of thoughts captured by his history, he thought of the nights in which he had bled, sitting by bookshelves of burned books. The way he had lain there for hours, realizing that his face was written in the blood and bones of two enemies. Only within his dreams he would seek his home whenever he was tired of running away from it. The pueblos made out of mountains, wooden homes at the edge of the earth, conquerors as they were the nightly brothers, riding through a field of poinsettias whose leaves burned its people. Something out here told him that it was all bound to be born and die on the hills, to grow as corn but to wither away as a corpse and be buried with native skeletons, covered up by red and yellow banners and crowns, a kingdom of mounds. He saw these thoughts along shorelines as if they were ships and boats on their way to start something new along that horizon. A covenant of crops, brushed by marine winds, though the foam of the salt water was covered in scarlet, fingers poking out of the sand like shards, lifeless. He picked up the wheat, the corn, and the beans left behind by his people and tried to start something new, proclaiming, para viajar por lo eterno, a través del fuego y de los espíritus del pasado, que viva la última generación. Aqua, swimming out into oblivion, forgotten like the ocean, only remembered for its blue and not the black it had once been. Salt in my eyes, washed by the sands, breathing air and water through both ears. Like running without legs, loving without heart, eating without hunger. The nearest determination is 1,000,000 miles north, yet the below is where all has gone, where the trenches wrote solitude, where the world wanted to be. The sounds create destruction and life under the same surface, a summer of neon tales, flagging through bubbles in the nights of the gentle, the body of the jellyfish, escaping away, only to never return. It searches for a scattered moon in the shape of glass bottle shards, afloat on a mire mixed with the ale of its contents. Somewhere, it begins to disappear and fall apart, deteriorating into gel, nothingness, infinity. Yet it still lives on as a reflection in the glass. To enjoy the beginning, there must not be anything, except everything, everywhere, but nowhere. Only that it does not burn, and the lungs subside into ocean, where it had been drowning and forever kept in silence. The Big Bang is shattered, and a new sea is born. It will remember the tides and keep its generation running towards every corner of the old world, and they will make sure God is here, at the end, to witness the birth of underwater. Dark nights are eternal, and bright days are too far. The water around me does not want to hurt me, for it only wants to make me the him when the world sought to make me the whom.
Gray matter. I'm the world on the tip of your tongue. The idea pacing the edge of your crease-cracked mind. Can't be scrawled in writing, can't be trapped in a photo. I just bleed through the paper till bits of me drip off the surface and collect under your fingernail-stained citrus like picking at orange peels while I apologize in advance for being... Scratch that. My essence. Essentially bound by law, yet trapped, lapping against the grain, fertilized with a festering compost of biodegradable love. I'm hollow, a shining shell of a man taped together at the edges, alone and waiting for the day I fall too hard and snap open like the spine of an old book, spilling all my nothing out for the world to see, to devour. Nah, that's not it either. Me, as in this figure, this form, am ripe for the picking. Your brain instinctively reaching for the softest part of me to tear apart with glass nails and those flint flake eyes of judgment that rake my skin into a frenzied foam of cells slathered on bone. And who am I to say stop? All I ask is you wait till the final wraith of air slips past my lips to make your move. I ask only that you wait. Far too many tongues have had their lives licked away before given the chance to speak. Memory. except the blood trickling down the rocks never dries. And neither do your buddy's tears. But that's before you realize fingertips against the parched skin of paper makes yours crawl, while sunblock and chlorine gases soothe the stench of gingerbread in preschool halls stretched much too damn long, like your tongue pretzeled into a beef braid every time you try to cough up the words encrusted in the walls of your throat, like the crunch of buttery lobster cut short by sweat-stained nights where you swear to mother the walls are caving in and the ceiling wants to eat you. And if it's true that it takes one to know one, then no one's ever known you at all, but at least there's lobster. For those that burn, with every he said, she said, we shed pieces of identity. Raked from the soul and that flicked from the skin, we bend for the words of others. Our own sisters and brothers spitting poison from forked tongues, seeping past months, past years, past the lifetime spent standing on weak knees and splintered steps, trying to paint a self-portrait with a blindfold strapped to our skins. These confused genes confuse me, while the outside world grips us by the gills to spill titles into our muddled minds, telling us which crowd we belong in, taking turns classifying our existences like some kind of carnival game. Playing pin the label on the biracial because even a drop of ambiguity leaves them squirming in their seats. Playing tic-tac-toe with identities that ain't meant to be remedied, so why must you look at me as the puzzle that needs solving? Nah, this piece can't go there. It doesn't match up with the rest of the picture. Those same eyes scanning the chocolate of my father, then drilling holes through my vanilla like something don't add up. Yeah, my bad. See, I guess I forgot to wake up and be the sum of all your hopes and dreams. Mental schemes spun to shuck this body of its layers one culture at a time. See, I guess I forgot to shut my black off to let that joke about George Floyd slide. And I guess I forgot to drain the white from my skin when the whole third grade learns the term cracker and turns my way. I guess I forgot to choose my race and stick with it. Like picking sides in some debate, like I'm not a living, breathing reminder of the worlds love can blend, the worlds we can create. The ride home. Road thoughts. 1. Straight away. The world appears differently through the context of a windshield. People are glimpses, only wisps and fragments of their true selves, bodies of buildings rend at the seams, warping to follow the vehicle, only to solidify before they get the chance. It makes no difference. Everything eventually finding its way into the rearview mirror, while the road ahead spools itself like taffy and dares me to take a bite. I accept every time. 2. Reverb. Music is more than mere sound when the bass can be felt. Bumping through the walls that surround me, it's tangible, touchable, thick enough to flood the car and real enough to breathe in lung-sized gulps. The rhythm feeds through my veins with every beat, coursing along with the same efficiency as my blood. I sometimes confuse the two, both bringing life, both capable of bleeding from their source, both composed of pure identity. If one could inject music into their body, would the melody fuel its functions? Could percussion be enough to pump blood? Would the heart grow tired of its tempo? The revelations wash over me like summer rain, stubborn and humid and heavy with contradiction. Heavy as the atmosphere that floats around the car, dark and cool, but riddled with the moisture that has no place to go, so it collects on the windows out of boredom. It's unmistakable, the calm before the storm. 3. Swelling. These days, the skies just can't seem to shake the rain no matter how hard they try. It starts out damp in the mornings, daylight teasing the slicked asphalt from behind the shade of clouds. Then all at once, afternoon hits and the air shifts, and by 3 o'clock the sun is no more. I'd watched the premature death through the window of a grocery store, the sky bulging to the point of tears. That alone had been enough to move me outside and into the car before the rain could touch my heels. 4. Downpour. I can't tell when one song fades and another takes its place. But that's okay, because the real music is outside smashing itself into the pavement while falling in the tune of G major. And the real music is humming to itself in a steel jungle filled with wild pistons and the untamable scent of gasoline steaming through its veins. Or maybe it's lost in between the arches of my fingers every time they tap against the steering wheel, the rhythm rubberized a little more with each motion. 5. Ignition. A turn of the key and the engine groans to life, waking up the radio with it. Usually I plug my phone into the aux and start up a playlist, but today feels different. I twist the dial bit by bit, embracing a wave of mindlessness as the stations spout out at me. A love song, spun with a country accent, a feral shriek of excitement, last week's Sunday service, the plastic patter of drizzle falling outside, an ad for Pablo's new steak burrito, an alert for a flash flood in the Jefferson County area, and a long and vulgar static that seems to intensify with every millisecond it takes for my hand to reach the off switch. I sit in the silence for a while, my ears still ringing. Who the hell is Pablo? 6. Intersection. The light's red and the sky has finally gone gray, all its sobs taking a toll on its natural beauty. I don't mind the color, the perfect balance between black and white, breaking the long disputed contrast over its knee with ease, harnessing the best and worst of both worlds into the single tone plastered against the dome of the world as a bittersweet sheet of rice paper. I stare into it and feel a gaze return to me as if my vision traveled the globe at light speed to wrap back around and hit me in the base of the skull. There's a certain solace I find within its hue, something that resonates deep in my being. My soul is smoky in my chest when the raindrops smear green light across the cobble. I hit the gas. Soul split. How does it feel? You there. Yeah, you. Boy with the curls and kinks of the black man, but with the pale exterior of the white man who whipped him. How does it feel? Use these dainty words to paint me a picture. Illustrate exactly how it feels to be a living contradiction. Walking around with the blood of two sides, divided through time with a line so thick, you wonder how you got through to the middle. Tell me exactly how it aches to be the product of an illegal love, one shamed, discouraged, spit upon to keep your people separate. How it burns to have the very essence of your DNA pulled in two directions. Double helix, split, stripped like a steel zipper being ripped two ways. How does one feel whole when his entire identity is the weathered rope in the middle of an eternal tug of war, dual forces dragging him every which way, pushing him every which way? Because if he's not 100% with them, he's got to be against them, right? Tell me, how does one look in the mirror and face the realization that the blood of both the slave and master dwells within him? Sheer opposite ends of the spectrum, swept up and shredded, stripped, sewn and threaded through tears, sweat, time and space just to pour into you. Tell me, how does it feel? Well, I'll tell you how it feels. But first, I want you, yeah, you, to take that high guard of yours and lower it. Break down the iron fences and barbed wire keeping you entrenched in what you feel to be safe. Take these words, bolstered by a strength sourced in the pain of a boy. A boy walking around with the blood of two sides, singing through time with rhythm and rhyme so thick you wonder how you've never heard this middle melody. Take these words and use them to open your mind and experience the product of a love that dared to burn despite the voices trying to stamp it out. A love that married the essence of DNA. Double helixes diced, chopped fine and spliced into one woven spirit to be served with spice. See, I'll tell you how it feels when your entire identity is a steel tether between two races, conducting the current discharge from each side to channel into electric harmony 50-50, and yet 100% human. I'll tell you exactly how one looks in the mirror and sees not only the slave and the master, but his own reflection. Sheer opposite ends of the spectrum, swept up and shredded, stripped, sewn, and embedded in the very same blood, sweat, and tears that flow through him. And it feels amazing.
I traced my roots to a Scottish town,
To a sycamore tree,
Past a decaying villa,
Down a zigzag path,
to a crawl out on the coast called Willie's Hole, where the fossilized ichthyostega lies, where she learned to walk, remade the water world, made earth and dirt synonyms, and left her bones instead of an estate.
a mile through a strip of woods to the river bend, leaning out over the edge, rubbed smooth by running water, struck by lightning for the third time, broken and knotted and still blooming.
roses and birds where bells were once tolled, calling names out to distant trees, like they are a burning forest that healed the people who rush pails of water out, desperate to set it out before it's too late.
snaking back to the sizzle and pop of primordial lightning, ancient storms burning corkscrew scars into the skin of the atmosphere until their wild bolts whisk the breath right out of the damp ground.
What a twist of fate that the escape from deep sea never healed, leaving me a water addict, dead without it, my blood thickening into mud which piles and presses until I too am fossilized. I rise from the water on my birth, as ichthyostega did when water breaks.
To the underwater haze, silent pressure of a chlorine pool in the backyard, the blue and gray tiled deck, the rain as it flings itself and fills the air with coming storm and petrichor and crashes in waves against the shore.
Because before, there used to be everything inside warm homes, around sisterly bonfires that breathed and died most nights, forgotten by riverbanks in the rain, only to just become whispered in the air and rush past the gravel beaches where the birds used to visit.
A strike that left behind a glistening seed, sealed by fate to burst like a grenade, blend soil with shrapnel, and offer the earth its first taste of gunpowder. But from the wreckage sprung green bolts of their own, a divine germination, spreading tendrils to irrigate the meat of the land, to make it fit for the fruit of life.
What a funny phrase, water breaking. A liquid, by definition, unbreakable. All beings share the womb or egg, since we survive or don't live to think about it. Ichthyostega is as much my mother as my mother is. I trace my lineage to a crawl out on the sea.
Leave me here in the float of filled lungs and subsumed in water and weighted by only what is required for life. I trace my roots to the water and what it gives.
Do you remember the birds? I think it was the birds who have done nothing to the world. It is said that the frailty of the rose is its grace being held against obligation and responsibility, as it is the birds being held against much rapture and happiness.
My roots trace themselves through the zigzag of veins beneath my skin, reveal themselves with every twisting strand of corkscrew shooting through my head, remind themselves of the beginning with the burning strike of my heart against my chest.